Now, in terms of like federal support, is it equal amongst states and Puerto Rico in terms of just federal support?
No, not at all. And especially when it comes to things like Medicare and Medicaid, there are limits on how much money the United States can send to Puerto Rico, or the extent to which those programs are federally funded compared to the states. Um, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it usually amounts to differences of billions of dollars per year. So Congress basically gets to make the rules when it comes to Puerto Rico, and if it wants to exclude it from certain federal programs, as it does with supplemental security income, for example, SSI, it can do that. If it wants to just fund programs at a lower rate in Puerto Rico than it would in the states, it can do that too. And that's because Puerto Rico's under what's called the territorial clause of the U.S. Constitution that says Congress can basically make the rules when it comes to its territories. And in the case of Puerto Rico, it usually decides rules to send us less money than they would or than they do the rest of the states.
Right. And how about FEMA, for example? Puerto Rico pays into FEMA. Is that correct or am I mistaken?
I think indirectly. My
Okay.
understanding is that FEMA is, just sort of funded by the U.S. government's general fund and by appropriations passed by Congress. A lot of that comes from, obviously federal income tax, which Puerto Ricans largely don't pay unless they live in Puerto Rico and work for the federal government. But some of that money, I believe, does come from payroll taxes, which is, your Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, the stuff that gets taken out of your paycheck, which Puerto Ricans do pay. So that's the other thing to understand sometimes about this idea that Puerto Rico doesn't pay taxes and gets all these federal benefits. Well, a lot of what Puerto Rico gets is Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. That's not a gift. That's Puerto Ricans paying into those systems
Right.
in our paychecks. So um, that's a huge part of the sort of total amount of money that the U.S. sends to Puerto Rico. A lot of it is veterans benefits, which, as you mentioned, a lot of veterans in Puerto Rico that earn those benefits in a different way. Um, so yeah, Puerto Ricans on the island do not pay federal income taxes. Pay a lot of other really high local taxes, as we were talking about, and that's certainly part of that conversation. But through payroll taxes, in other ways, we do end up contributing to some extent, at least, to these systems. Yeah, for sure.